Information about the world of running, inspiration to fuel passion and excellence, and ideas for making connections and finding community. You're listening to A to Z Running.
Welcome back, episode 47. Zach here.
And Andy.
And we're talking this week with Cindy Ofili.
Who's an Olympian.
About developing speed.
Yes, and she's a sprint hurdler, so she knows a lot about speed.
And we're going to talk to you about how that matters for distance runners. But before you do anything else, stop now. Go to AtoZrunning.com, AtoZrunning.com, and in the top right-hand corner, click follow.
Subscribe. It's for free.
Also, we're on a lot of social media stuffs at A to Z Running, as Andy taught me last week about handles.
Now he's got a handle on it. Something that came to us through social media was a question from Sam. And he asked us, what are good stretches and exercises to make your knees feel healthier?
Sam Inman, how are you doing? I haven't seen you in a long time. I coached Sam in high school. This is really exciting. And taught him when I was at the Aviation Academy. So, Sam, thanks for the question. Okay, lots of you should perk up right now, because if you have any kinds of knee discomforts, pain, tightness, and otherwise, there's some really important things for you to be thinking about, and I'm going to try to do this concisely so I don't get too verbose or Andy will cut me off.
I will.
Jay
we'll have to do a full
DeSherry.
episode on it if it requires more explanation.
Probably could. Jay DeSherry is the first place you need to start, because he writes about the different ways that things can be tight or uncomfortable. So it's important to first figure out why is it hurting and how the hurting it is happening. So certain areas, certain directions, those kinds of things. Now, in general, if it's a constant injury, like prolonged injury over time, or if it's something new, if it's something acute, all of those things matter before I can say anything helpful to you. But if it is an acute injury, like something traumatic or like rotation-related injury, don't do anything I'm about to say and go see a health person. Because your knees are so important, and they can get harmed in a lot of different kinds of ways, and some of those ways that get harmed do not heal well unless you have very significant kinds of therapy that are specific. And what I'm going to say here is not that.
So, yes, seek medical help.
All right. Now, here are the reasons your knees are uncomfortable. 1, because they're too weak. 2, because they might be too tight. Or 3, because they're too strong in certain places, in certain ways. So they're either too weak or too strong or unbalanced in some capacity. And so when that happens, you've got so many muscles around your knee, especially the muscles above your knee, that influence its movement. So when any one of them is pulling too much or too little from tightness, weakness, strength, and otherwise, then you end up with discomfort. And that discomfort almost always lingers. It's hard to get rid of it until you address the problem. So you've got your IT bands on the side, you've got your quads over the top, and you've got the adductors, which are those, it's that tight cord of a muscle that runs right along the inside of your knee or into the inside of your knee. And then of course your hamstrings on the back. And you really need to work on loosening all that stuff up. If you want to figure out what's actually harming your knee in some capacity, you got to start by getting everything mobile, because then once it's all mobile, you can start to figure out if you have some strength disparities somewhere. And there's a lot of different ways to strengthen the muscles around your knee, because there's so many different muscles that can influence that. So I'll just mention that it's important to try to do some kind of strength testing to figure out, if you squeeze an exercise ball between your knees and it's very hard for you to apply much pressure, then your adductors are pretty weak, which is super common for distance runners. In general, for anyone, it's very common to have weak adductors. And so if you have strong IT bands, like you're doing hip work and your hips are strong and your adductors are weak, you're applying a ton of torque on the outside of your knee, and it can't be offset by those adductors. So this is the concept I'm talking about. If you try to extend your knee in front of you, like if you're sitting down and someone pushes down on your foot and it's really easy for them to just shove your foot down, then your quads are too weak. You got to work on something to strengthen your quads. And the same thing, in the back. If you try to pull your heel up while you're laying flat on your stomach and you have very little strength there, then your hamstrings are weak. And so all of that is kind of how you try to identify this. But in general, Sam, you need to work on loosening up all the muscles, all 4 directions around the knee. And once you've done that, then you got to do some general strength stuff, or try to identify where it's weakest and do some general strength stuff.
It's very possible for Sam that it is something with tightness because he's a lifter.
Sam, you do the weights. You do them very well. So, yes, and especially if you're doing a lot of strength work, then the most likely thing is an unbalance somewhere. So if you got some tightness influencing that and you have really strong quads, but you have weak adductors, things like that. So
we'll do a blog post about that this week coming on Thursday. We're going to put this into a blog post so that you can see more visually what we're talking about here, because this honestly could be an entire podcast.
And with that, we also have some things to give to you for free.
I know. I'm so excited because we just did a giveaway last week, and that was on Instagram. This week, we want to do it exclusively for our listeners. So if you would help us by leaving a review, rate us on Apple Podcasts if that's where you're listening, or if you can't rate on the device that you have, on Facebook. Your rating will help us grow our reach, and we're going to be giving tablets of Noon and an AtoZrunning shirt. So if you do that for us, it will help us, but also you could win a little something. And I have to say thank you to Noon for sending it to us to give to you. Noon has been great. I am a brand ambassador for Noon, and I've started using it, and it's a really great tasting drink. And I have problems with that. I don't know if any of you guys get nauseous when you're working hard, but Noon has stayed with me and has given me the energy. We're sending you Sport, and I've been using that consistently, and I've felt really good and hydrated on my runs this summer.
So here's the thing with Noon. It's not super sweet like Gatorades and Powerades, which we do not like drinking. But it also is just subtle. The flavors are subtle. They're not very strong or overpowering in some way. So that's why we tend to enjoy them.
Yeah, and they have a little bit of fizz. So that helps me a little bit.
Andy likes her little fizzies.
I do. It's so
It
yummy.
makes my nose tickle.
So very yummy.
You don't care about my ticklish nose. What you care about is the world of running and so many great things going on. Let's get to that next. All right, first thing to discuss in running news is another Diamond League meet. And I should say, these aren't usually stacked up against each other like this, one after another. But obviously, with the nature of like races rescheduled and canceled, and they're trying to fit in what they can still from the Diamond League. So this one in Stockholm, and not a barn burner like Monaco was, but still some good performances,
including a massive performance by Karsten Warholm. It was the second fastest time in 400-meter hurdle history.
By under 1/10 of a second.
Yeah, and he had the second fastest before, but he broke his own national time of 46.87.
So a new Norway record as well as a new European record, and the current world record is still held by Kevin Young of the USA back from like 1992 Olympics.
Like 28-year-old record.
28-year-old record, yeah. And they keep talking about how Karsten hit the last hurdle, and everyone's wondering, could that have been 0.09 seconds worth, which is very possible. But it should be noted that when Kevin Young set the current world record, he also hit the last hurdle. So now you're comparing apples to apples now, and so it's interesting.
But there's a lot of future left for Karsten, so that is very exciting. We're looking forward to seeing him hopefully break that world record time. And another thing to note, I think that's pretty cool, is that he doubled that day and did the 400-meter flat race. I guess that's what hurdlers say. We should have asked Cindy about that. Flat race in the same day in 45.05.
Wait, so with hurdles, he ran just about a second and a half slower?
I guess
Those hurdles don't
yeah.
slow him down that much.
Not at all. So he finished, it was the greatest 400 hurdle, 400 meter run, single day double in world history.
I'm not aware that anyone else has ever done that.
I mean, that seems pretty amazing to me.
Certainly at a Diamond League level, too. So there were certainly a few other notable performances. I think there was a national record. Let's see, it was in Denmark in the women's 100-meter hurdles, and that was Mette Graversgaard. Of course, I botched her name, but
sorry.
She ran 13 seconds in the 100-meter hurdles, 13.1, which is certainly a strong performance.
And Laura Muir, you've heard us say her name on the podcast before.
She's been racing
strong
like
contender.
crazy this summer.
She really has. Laura Muir ran a world-leading time in the 1,500-meter run in 3:57.86.
Wow, that's blazing. So 3:57. Anytime you see a sub-4 time from women's 1,500-meter hurdles, is world-class. There's only a handful of athletes that do that in a given year, and so it's quite impressive. Now, it's not a personal best for Laura Muir. She has run a little bit faster, but a world lead, and she won the race by like 4 seconds.
That's amazing.
Over an elite field. I mean, it was a good field.
I mean, this is a Diamond League event.
Yeah. Aside from that, it sounds like there was a great jump in the pole vault as well by Mondo Duplantis. He's from Sweden, and he rocks the world in the last few years here in the pole vault. But
he jumps the world.
He jumps okay. So we haven't been talking a lot about jumps and throws and those kinds of things because it's not running. But it's
we
still
love
notable.
It. And we're very impressed by
it's track and field. It's great. And in a separate place, back over across the world in Tokyo, we had a national record from Nozomi Tanaka running a new 1,500-meter national record in 4:05, which was solid.
So the London Marathon, we have strong contenders. We had mentioned last week or a couple weeks ago that Sarah Hall is gearing up for a fall marathon, and we predicted that it could be the London Marathon. Well, we didn't predict it. We saw the predictions out there, and it is so. She has been announced as part of the elite field among some greats. It's going to be a very exciting event.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if these numbers are final, but it looks like they've got 12 and another 15. They've got just under 30 signed up at the moment. And so I'm curious if that's the whole field or if there's still more coming. But we've got the big names already there. It's clear that this is going to be a great race. We've got Bridget Koske, current world record holder in the marathon. Ruth Chepngetich, Rosa Dereje.
Vivian Chariot, who we've talked about on this podcast before because she is also very speedy in like 5K, 10K.
And Degitu Azimura, which now rounds out, when we say those five, all five of them have PRs of under 2:20.
Oh, that's so fast.
Which I don't know if you ever get five marathoners with a sub 2:20 PR in a single race. That rarely ever happens for the women. So
and to give perspective, like men to qualify for the Olympic trials is 2:18.
2:19.
2:19, excuse me. So like that's knocking on the door of elite men.
Yeah, these women marathoners are some of the best marathoners, period. We're not just talking about best women marathoners. So, and clearly, you know, that's just the top five PRs, of course, in the field. There's a whole slew of others within a couple of minutes of those five as well. Sarah Hall being another one. She's run 2:22, so. I
do want to mention that Molly Seidel is also among the elite field, and she is going to Tokyo as a U.S. marathoner. So she will experience her first Olympics. This will be her second marathon, unless she does a marathon before this one, which I highly doubt. But this will be her second marathon. Her Olympic trials marathon was her debut.
So Sarah and Molly are the only two Americans currently in the field. But that's why I said earlier, I'm interested if this is a final or if there are more still to come.
Speaking of the marathon, I do want to mention that Brittany Charbonneau won the Pikes Peak Ascent and Marathon, and it's called America's Ultimate Challenge for a good reason because the average grade is 11%.
So you just run up the whole time?
You do come back down too, but there is 7,815 feet of climbing.
Yeah, and that's not just 7,000 from 0 to 7,000. That's from 7,000 to 14,000 at the top of Pikes Peak. So they run, if you've ever been to the top of Pikes Peak, that's the one you can drive all the way to the top. It's 14,000 feet at the summit. That's crazy.
That is crazy.
You can't even breathe at 14,000 feet.
And Brittany's just killing it in these trail races. We've had her on the podcast before, and we hope to have her on in the future, but she is just a bright light of joy and obviously ridiculously tough.
And it should be stated, and we are not saying this to make anyone feel badly, but she did that in 4 hours and 25 minutes. I don't think I could do that.
A mountain marathon.
I don't think I could do that.
A mountain.
So I went to Pikes Peak. Andy, have you ever been to the top of Pikes Peak? You done that with a family vacation ever? I did. And
sure.
I think I was in high school, and I went up to the top. So we drove it. We didn't try to run that. We drove it, and I got up to the top. And, of course, I jumped out of the car and thought, I'm going to see what it feels like to run a couple of laps around, because it's actually like kind of wide open space at the top. They've made it clearly quite touristy. Well, I get up to the top, and I start running laps, and I got maybe 30 seconds in and figured I was about to fall apart and my lungs were going to collapse. So
got to train for this stuff, Zach.
Yeah,
dear.
That's something that
it
people
gives you
do.
more perspective to understand these amazing athletes that ran this event, the Pikes Peak Ascent and Marathon.
So here's a great opportunity for any of you listening, if you've done mountain races, especially mountain marathons, because I know some of you have, because I know some of you listening, and I know that you have. So tell us about that experience. What does it feel like compared to sea level running, all those kinds of things? We're very curious for the intimate details about what it takes to run mountain marathoning. And we also wanted to mention, because there were certainly more races and more results happening all over the place, but the On Running team did run again in LA, so we'll put a link to those results. Got some PRs and 5Ks and a few other decent performances there too.
It was the 2020 Under Armour Sunset Tour.
So let's take a hard transition now into talking about speed for distance runners.
We are thrilled to have on the podcast today Olympian Cindy Ofili. She's a sprint hurdler, super speedster, and at the 2016 Olympic Games in Rio, she was 4th place. Amazing performance there. She went to the University of Michigan and was the 2016 NCAA Indoor Champion in the 60-meter hurdles and Big Ten Indoor Track Athlete of the Year in 2014. She also holds school records at the University of Michigan in the indoor 200 meters and the outdoor 100-meter dash. So she does flat races too. I do want to mention that she has the 3rd fastest time in British history in the 100-meter hurdles.
And we just mentioned the Denmark national record went down in 13.1, but she's run 12.6.
Yeah, so she's so fast, world-class athlete, and she's no stranger to adversity. She's ruptured her Achilles, and she talks about a lot of the struggles that she's gone through and what she has learned and how she has grown on our YouTube channel that we will be linking to in the show notes, which are AtoZrunning.com/episode 47. She kept the faith through and overcoming injury, and since that injury, she was the champion of the 60-meter hurdles at the Great Britain Indoor Championships 2019.
So certainly a unique guest for us in some sense, because she's a sprinter and a hurdler for that, and we tend to talk to distance runners. But we also wanted to bring to you an important aspect of running well. You know, we talk a lot about thriving, and in order to thrive as a runner, you need to be able to do a number of things well, and one of those is your top-end speed. How efficient can you be at your top end speed? And that is important.
And who better to interview than someone who has such amazing speed and accurate precision in her racing abilities. So we are so thankful to have this world-class runner on this episode.
So here's what you want to look for. Aside from the great story and just hearing about her life a bit, you want to look for the different ways that an athlete in general can build speed. And she'll talk about things from drills, activation, mobilization types of things to get your body ready to go fast. She'll talk about explosive, active strength things like plyometrics and some of that. And she'll talk about weights and general strength building or isolated strength building and just some of the ideas surrounding how to do that well for raw speed. Then what we're going to do after the interview is done, we're going to take it full circle back to, so what does this look like for a distance runner? And we're going to break down for you how you should be doing some of those things to build your speed and when in your training is the best time to do it.
Without further ado, let's talk to Cindy Ofili. Cindy, welcome to the A to Z Running podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Oh, we're excited too. And belated happy birthday to you.
Well, happy
Thank
birthday.
you so much.
When was your birthday?
August 5th. So I just turned 26.
So this is exciting times because there's like birthdays all around on this
We're
podcast.
both August birthdays
Are
as
you?
well. So it's
okay.
it's a celebration month.
It is. Happy birthday to you guys as well.
So second thing, congrats, because you just ran a super speedy time very recently, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So it was a season's best. I ran, I think 2.5 weeks ago. So it was a good race. And despite the circumstances with the year, I'm really happy to be competing again.
Okay, cool. As we told everyone in your introduction, you were 4th at the Olympic Games in Rio. Congratulations to you. That's
Thank
massive.
you.
We watched it a few times. You know, we watched it while it was going on, but what an exciting race. And
I appreciate it. Yeah.
It was masterfully done too. So give us a little bit of your running journey.
Yeah, okay. So I started running when I was in high school. Tried it out my freshman year, but my sister had been doing it before me. So I wasn't really super excited because I wanted to be a little different than she was, but I was like, let me just see how it goes. And initially when I was running, it was not coming to me very naturally. And so it was more of a struggle than anything, and I wasn't enjoying it. So I decided to quit, and I'm like, I'm going to move on to a different sport or wherever else I'm supposed to be. And then my high school coach came back and said, you know, I see potential. I think you can do something with this thing. Like, give it one more try. And so I came back, and, you know, the rest is kind of history, I guess. It just started getting a little bit more natural, and I improved a lot to the point where I got offered a scholarship to the U of M. And then, after U of M went pro, and now I'm here talking about running, which is funny.
Awesome. Do you feel like there was ever a moment where, or at least a period of time where you just started to see that you were that person? Like, I am a professional, I am an elite level athlete here.
To be honest, it took me a while to get to that point. I think I would say towards even the end of my college career is when I started believing that. As I started, you know, getting into high school, I was still not the most confident athlete, even though I started running fast. And so it took me a while to believe that I can even just be with the elites, because I used to watch them on TV and say, oh, I can never do that. And, you know, I knew they were fast, but I didn't think I would be at the level someday, which I am now. And so to kind of see how far I've gotten is sometimes a little bit shocking in a sense, because I'm like, you know, back in the day, I did not see this happening to me at this point. So
No doubt. Do you think that makes a difference, Cindy, that to be able to believe that and to hold that inside as you're competing and as you're training and all of that?
Oh, absolutely. It's like, as soon as I had that shift, I felt like I felt myself get faster. I felt my times get better. I felt as soon as you just believe it, I think you can achieve so much more than you think you're capable of. And so once I really worked on that mental shift, I think that is where some of my best performances came in, and how I was even able to get to that point of being at the Olympics, to be honest, because if I didn't believe I could do it, I would never have, because there was a lot of days where I doubted myself, but I kept going just because I knew in my heart I could do it. But if I didn't actually believe it, I would have given up a lot sooner. So,
So what was that moment like when you came in for your race in Rio, when you came through those arches and you're in a stadium of people, your name is being announced? What was that moment like?
It was a bit surreal, I'm not gonna lie. So the prelim was the most nerve-wracking, which is funny because you would think like the final would be the most. But for me, going into it the first time, I was super just nervous and didn't know what to expect. And then as soon as I hurdled, I was like, oh, okay, I can still hurdle. I got this. And so each round was still nerve-wracking, don't get me wrong, but it just felt like, you know, I gained more confidence. And in the final, to be honest, I was, 22. I had been running well. I was just like, I'm gonna give it my all, and whatever happens, happens. So it was more of just not putting too much pressure on myself. And I think that's actually what led to a decent performance, because I think I just relaxed and I trusted my training that whole year. But yes, it was definitely a surreal experience to like be in front of such a big crowd and just know that the world's kind of watching. So
just so cool. Our audience, like we've mentioned to you, are mostly distance runners. So the fact that you run this fast like blows our mind. And you have hurdles to get there. So let's talk about speed and how you've developed speed throughout your training as a professional.
Yeah, so to be honest, it developed as time went on. I was never super fast, but I think with just really perfecting my skills with my sprint drills and doing a lot of short work. So for instance, working on my start, working on my explosiveness, that really helped me. And just like really good, I guess, short sprint work, like running 10s and 30s and 20s, those are really what helped me. And then as I progressed in my career, lifting weights is really big for us because it helps build that muscle that we need to explode out the blocks or to keep going in the last 20 meters. And so, I would say that just really being cognizant of how you're doing your drills helped me, because if you're just kind of being lackadaisical or just not really focusing on it, then it's easy to not, I guess, have the proper technique and run fast. So I've made sure to really be focused on that throughout my career.
So Cindy has some great videos about what she's talking about right now. So I'm going to make sure that I link to those so you guys can see for yourself. And one thing that I really noticed, and I was like, yes, this is so good. Your dynamic stretching and using the band and taking the time before your workouts to activate, to mobilize. I think that is such a great takeaway, whether you're a distance runner or you're a sprinter, you're a sprint hurdler, like, you got to have that mobility, right? And the activation to get going.
So when you're talking about kind of the work you're doing to develop your speed and to certainly condition that in your body, you're talking about a couple of different factors, if I'm synthesizing this well. On the one side, we have the kinds of like drills and mobility, activation, and all of those kinds of factors. And then you have certainly like the raw strength with weightlifting and some of those things. And I imagine there's kind of something in between with like explosiveness with like plyometric type, that kind of stuff. I am curious then. So when we talk about things like that with distance runners, certainly, the way you do things has a lot to do with the kinds of muscle fibers you need to recruit the most, right? So distance runners, it's all slow twitch stuff. You don't necessarily think about the need for high explosive muscle fiber recruitment and such. But what do you do when I'm thinking specifically at the moment about weightlifting then? How do you lift weights in a manner that supports those things?
Right. So one thing we do is we do Olympic lifts. So we do a lot of power cleaning. We do clean and jerks. We do back squats, front squats, a lot of just explosive work in the weight room. That seems to be very helpful for us. It just kind of replicates what we're doing on the track personally. And I noticed actually, I went to school obviously with distance runners. And so we would all have different lifts and workouts. And I noticed that the distance runners would always do less weight, but more reps. And that seems to help them with their, last 100 of their 10 or their 2 mile or whatever that is. And so I think just being to really work on that speed, just either working on the amount of reps you're doing is super helpful, or just how much weight you're putting on it. I guess it just depends what kind of speed you're trying to look for. But yes, we do a variety of different things, and just, like you said, plyometrics and a lot of box hops and hurdle hops, all those things. So those things are really helpful.
So what would you say is the biggest thing that holds people back, like in general, from unlocking their speed and their potential for speed?
Honestly, I know it's very cliche, but just the mindset, really, because I think we all have speed within us. I mean, not everybody's like as gifted as others. I understand that, but I do believe, like, I personally wouldn't be as quick as I am if I didn't believe it. And a lot of people wouldn't. And so just believing you can do it and just, really having that mindset is the biggest thing. But then I guess on a more practical note, really, being cognizant of what you're doing on the track in the pre-warm-up and, cooling off, all those things really do make a difference, and they add up over time. So like I said earlier, the stretching is what really helps me personally be able to explode. If I was very tight, I couldn't truly unlock the speed at practice that I need for, multiple reps. And so that warm-up is super important. And then just the cool off is important as well, because if I'm cooling off properly, I know it's going to reflect well for the next day. So I think the small things are actually what helps the overall speed people don't usually pay attention to.
So tell us a little bit about your pre-race routine.
So I do about an hour and 15 minutes to 20 minutes when I warm up. I like to take it slow, like in the beginning, just like jogging a few laps and then stretching, and then like really getting into my sprint drills and just like the quick things. So the first 15 minutes is just more light, when then after I start to really get my speed rolling, I take quite a bit of breaks. And so I try not to get too tired before the race. And so I'll go and drink water, and I try to get some electrolytes in me before I start doing my starts, and then I start really, getting in the zone of what am I trying to work on today. So I really just do a few starts. I work on some hurdle drills, and then it's go time. So really the hour and a half that I'm warming up goes really fast, because I'm literally so in the zone and I'm doing so many things, but then like it's here, and then honestly, I get really nervous once it's time to go into the call room, but it's all part of the experience, and it's a lot of fun.
And that's why we wanted to talk to you, because I think a lot of runners, including myself, we spend too much wasted energy, and we aren't always on our game and ready. And you are the expert at that, at the highest level, at the Olympic level. You are an expert at getting yourself ready to toe the line and being ready right away. And like I was saying before, even if some of our listeners aren't sprinters or sprint hurdlers, they're going to benefit from getting ready and being ready at the line.
Definitely.
So as we talk to you and I'm like hearing these things, it's like, even though we don't have the explosion, I think it's crucially important to be precise and to get things moving and going early on. So as we're talking about this, like, what would you tell our listeners in regards to becoming excellent in what they do?
Yeah, that's a good question. Studying your craft is huge. I think it's really important to just never get complacent. We never perfect anything. I don't think anybody in this world is perfect. And so it's really important to be a student of the game and to always want to learn. And so that's something I totally do. I love to watch myself run, and I like watching other hurdlers who run faster than me. And that's super helpful. And visualization, that's really, really big. And my husband and I were just talking about it not too long ago, and we were literally discussing how it's important to just literally visualize and how much of a difference that can make. And so, I think that's really huge. And yeah, just being smart about what you're doing, whether, like you said earlier, like warming up properly, cooling off, just doing all those little things, whether that's icing after your workouts or whatever, because that, like, you might not feel it in the moment when you're doing it, but all that stuff adds up into what you really want to accomplish. And, the small things really do make a difference. And so that's what has helped me over the years.
And if some of our listeners are looking for education, Cindy does have, like I mentioned, this YouTube channel that's rich with a lot of great stuff. She talks about, keeping the faith during injury. So the element of faith, but then also fitness. And what was the third thing? Faith, fitness, and health.
Health. Yeah.
So it's a well-rounded YouTube channel. So for those of you who are, wanting to know where to take another step in education, Cindy's YouTube channel is a great place.
Yeah, for sure. Check it out.
That's one of the things that we appreciate most. I guess I see it in two ways in professional athletes, kind of across the board. I see the athlete who really, kind of narrows their focus and is very inward and within themselves. And their work is very private and those kinds of things. And I don't begrudge the athlete that. I know, especially when, if pressure is high, it helps to be able to keep that internal. And then we see athletes who really put their expertise out there for other people to learn from it and for other people to engage with it. And we've seen you doing that and really appreciate that because I think, as I reflect on why do I love track and field, right? That's one of the things I always kind of just wonder about because not everybody does.
Right.
But why?
What?
Why?
No, he's wrong about that. Everyone loves it.
Everybody should.
Everybody should. I agree with that.
Yeah.
But that's kind of, it's because of the constant growth in the sport, so I've been a part of it myself. So part of it is personal, but then also just because I've seen so many passionate people in the sport and I just keep thinking we don't see enough of the passion that's in the sport because it's there.
Yes.
I meet the athletes all the time. It's there. And so we appreciate that you're taking that and extending it outward like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our careers are so short as athletes and we need to really take advantage of that. And I really I think it's important to try to tell people how I'm learning along the way because there's so many lessons that athletics gives us. And if we're just kind of holding it in, that's doing our sport a disservice, that's doing others a disservice. And I think it's just really important for us to really help everybody as we are going through this process within ourselves. And so that's really what the basis of why I do what I do is because I really want everybody to see, the behind the scenes or how you can actually like get better and what we're actually learning in the process of it. And hopefully it impacts somebody out there.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I believe 100% that you are. And like I was mentioning about this, keep the faith during injury. I thought it was so great for the times that we're in right now. You put this video out in 2018 and you were talking about ways to keep the faith. And I think all of us with the pandemic, meditation and prayer, staying in community, learning something new, learning something else. I just thought that was really relevant for these times.
Yeah, so
sure.
we've said it a number of times. We just want to make sure that we say it again because we appreciate your time here right now.
Thank you.
But also the work that you're doing as you're taking your passion and your expertise and you're sharing it with the world at large. So we want to make sure that our audience is aware of that work too, and we can all kind of grow together with it.
Yeah, I love what you guys are doing. I like podcasts like this. I think it's going to be very inspiring for athletes.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks.
No problem.
All right, so you heard it. Now the question is, what does this mean for you and for us as distance runners? Really appreciate it as she was just talking through, a number of different kinds of experiences. It's always really exciting to me to hear the, and I especially enjoy the aspect of like, what does it truly look like start to finish? That race experience. And so while that part of it wasn't necessarily the emphasis I'm talking about here, it's really valuable to think about what does it take to truly prepare myself for the highest possible performance that I can gain. And so I liked that conversation. I really did.
The amount of preparedness that she has to do before her race, it has a lot more weight than for us as distance runners, but I do think that it's something that we need to cling to and work out in our own methods as we approach running fast and racing.
Well, if you think about it, for a sprinter, and especially the short sprints, they have to be at the moment of greatest possible yield of physical performance when the race starts. So, I mean, a marathoner, think about what that would take for a marathoner. Like, you basically want to be as chill and low key as possible when you start a marathon.
But you do want your glutes to work.
You want your body to be ready,
Yeah.
but you don't want to be like hyped and ready to go crazy hard. You don't want to be at that state because you're too ready. But let's get into the point now about what does it look like for a distance runner to build speed. And we're just going to take a couple of minutes here and break this down further for you. So the first thing is the drills, the activation, the mobility, and such. We need that in general. I think all athletes need a degree of activity in order to be prepared for an effort, whatever the kind of effort is. But the actual raw speed elements of that, any of the fast twitch types of things have value for general activation. You'll notice if you do, even like a lot of distance runners will do a couple of stride outs before a run, just a couple of short, quick stride outs, at the end of a series of drills. And that actually helps just in general feeling better in the run. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason for that. The neuromuscular activation that happens when you're moving your legs as hard or as fast as you can, in general, translates to greater degrees of comfort at any pace. So raw speed, period, helps you feel better no matter what pace you're running, even if you're just running marathon pace. Mm-hmm. So the practical example that you see the most from distance runners is a kind of like fast leg drill where you're basically doing like an A skip, except you're moving your leg up and down as quickly as possible. And then you take 2 steps and then you do the other one, or 2 or 3 steps, whatever. You alternate legs when you're doing it. And that's a really great thing to do right at the end of your warm-up routine before you start running. In general, it helps to build some of those fast twitch muscle fibers, and it will, if you especially do it daily, it'll translate over time to just quickening your turnover.
Yeah. I used to do drills every day before running, and I've started to do them again because I just find so much value and I feel so much better when my body is firing on all cylinders.
So if we're talking about before running, those are some simple, quick things to do. After running, or in general, any kind of strength work like weights and such, here's the thing, and this is very important for distance runners to think about. We are never trying to build muscle mass as a distance runner. That is not good for you if you're running marathons and things like that. So you do want to have stronger muscles, but you want that functional strength that Jay DeSherry talks about, that Mike Swinger talks about, some of those guests that we've had on and some of those other works that we've been citing. So how do we best do functional strength with weights and such? Doing things like weighted lunges and weighted step-ups onto things. Some of that kind of work is valuable. Now, the best recommendation that I've seen on how a distance runner should lift weights is actually very similar to how a sprinter lifts weights. And this is really fascinating. So Cindy even said, when I see distance runners lift weights, they do lower weight and higher reps, a higher number of reps. And that's true. Most of the time, that's what you see. That's not really what you should be doing as a distance runner, because what you're supposed to be doing in the weight room is those type 2B raw power explosive muscle fibers. You do want to work on those, but you don't want to build muscle mass. So instead, you do really high weight, very short reps, very few reps, just like a sprinter does. It's fascinating.
Okay.
But there's a reason, because a sprinter is doing that for the same reason that a distance runner would. You're trying to build those fast twitch muscle fiber strength. So that's what you do in the weight room, and I wouldn't do a lot of it, especially wouldn't do a lot of it on muscle groups that you don't necessarily use for running as much, but you certainly can spend time in the weight room if you want to. However, the third and probably the most important consideration for distance runners and building speed are things you can do while you're running. Certain kinds of workouts, certain kinds of running drills that you do during a run. So if any of you are being or have been trained by us, then you know exactly what I'm about to talk about because you didn't like it or don't like it. Carl, I'm talking to you right now. No, I'm kidding. Carl actually has had some positive feedback about this one. But so the hill circuit that Lydiard had his athletes doing once upon a time is one of the weirdest kinds of workouts. And everyone thinks it's just like a strange thing to do for a distance runner for workouts. But it is really powerful for this kind of thing. And it involves things like doing, skips and bounds uphill, which is really important for that's a plyometric workout, basically. You're doing a plyometric workout uphill. And then you also do fast downhill striding down the hill.
Be careful.
Be very careful. And
don't do this. Some of us
can't
can't do it.
Yeah, don't do this just willy-nilly. There's a time and a place for this. I'll get to that in a moment. But the downhill striding helps to open up your stride. It's a stride mechanics type of thing, which is really valuable, especially and most importantly, if you maintain control. You should never feel out of control running downhill because you're probably going to hurt yourself.
And we have a very recent experience where I was doing that going down a hill, and Zach's like, don't break your hips.
And then
You're
her
too
hips got
old
hurt.
for this. No, they did not.
Andy was running down a sand dune.
It was amazing.
She was frolicking
Totally worth
like
it.
when we were all children down the sand dune. And I'm thinking, oh, that looks fun, except for the hip injury that's forthcoming. Okay. Well, so here's the thing. You can do that kind of a workout. Basically, you don't want to do it too much because it's inefficient. There's other kinds of workouts that you need to be doing as a distance runner, so you're not going to be doing that kind of thing all the time. But I would think, and Lydiard always placed it with his athletes, right after the long base building aerobic condition has been set, this kind of a workout is a great transitionary type of thing before you get into really hard anaerobic types of stuff. And, of course, you can always do things like short, fast strides. Toss those into an easy run occasionally. You can do that year round.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter where you are in your training cycle.
I know there's like a difference of opinion, but we have an opinion about that. We have an opinion about doing your strides throughout your run and not just doing them
not right at the
end.
end, not right at the beginning.
It has way more value for your form and your mechanics, and even you're not really working on your anaerobic system at all. You won't be going long enough to do that. So the idea would be to sprinkle them throughout to get better running economy, and that's the purpose.
Yeah, you want the science here? It's because you have an energy system, a third one. We've talked about this before, but if this is not familiar to you or you haven't listened to those episodes, here it is in short. You have a third energy system. You have your aerobic, you have your anaerobic. You also have what's called an alactic anaerobic energy system. Alactic meaning it's not going to build up lactic acid, but it's still anaerobic because you don't need oxygen. And that is the sprinter's
The little
paradise.
strides, yeah.
That lasts about 10 seconds, and if you've ever heard of people taking like creatine supplements when they're doing certain kinds of workouts, the reason why is because the alactic anaerobic energy system uses creatine phosphate for fuel to create ATP in your muscles, which means you have about a 10-second supply of a really high energy, high output fuel system that replenishes itself really quickly. Which means this is why you sprinkle these kinds of things throughout a run, because after about 3 to 5 minutes of easy running, it's going to be very nearly back up to 100%, and you can just drain it again. So you can do that throughout a run. You can do 10, 12, 15 strides throughout a run with 3 to 5 minutes of jogging between, and you never hit any kind of anaerobic system, so you're not building up lactic acid. Your recovery time is just fine. You can run a hard workout the next day and not even notice it, except don't do them too hard. Especially if you haven't been doing them before. Like the first time you go out. You'll be sore. Yeah, because you're...
Because we're not Cindy Ofili. We're not Olympian speedsters.
All right, so let me give it to you in a summary. Distance runners, to build speed, and you should be doing speed work in every training cycle, okay? That doesn't mean you're doing it throughout, but in every training cycle, you should be doing some raw speed work, and it functions in 3 ways. First of all, it's not a bad idea to do some weight stuff here and there, but if you don't have the time or ability to do that, that's fine. That's least priority. Second, everyone should be doing various kinds of muscle activation and mobilization work before running.
Like Cindy has on her YouTube channel, which we linked to.
Good example. So you should be doing some of that kind of stuff and include in it right at the end, don't do this at the beginning, but right at the end, include some fast muscle twitch types of stuff. And if you need some examples of that, reach out to us. We can create a routine that shows. We have one that we'll share from Dave Hodgkinson, which gives a great example of some really simple stuff, and it takes like 2 minutes to do. So do that. But third and most importantly, in your training cycles, at any point in time in your training period on easy runs, you can throw in some strides. And this doesn't have to be a scheduled thing. If you're feeling like you're just lethargic and lagging in the speed department, then throw in 2 or 3 strides on an easy run that day. And you don't have to do that planned. You can do that anytime. Also, whenever you're exiting your base building conditioning phase, and if you don't do periodization in your training, like a hard base training, and then you have an anaerobic phase and all that kind of stuff, talk to us, because maybe you should be. I'm not saying everyone has to train the exact same way, but we'd love to share some thoughts with you. Anyway, do at some point before you get into the really hard speed work, like anaerobic types of stuff, do some work on hills that include some plyometrics up the hill, high knees, bounding, springing. I'm not really even too concerned with exactly what you do going up the hill, but you treat it like a plyometric workout, not like a hill workout. You're not sprinting up the hill. Do some of that, and then do some quick, relaxed downhill striding as long as you keep in control.
And if you have some hip problems, you might not want to.
Yes. So be very careful with your general state of health. And if you have some Achilles problems, don't do uphill bounding and springing because that will aggravate it enormously. Unless you can get the Achilles problems under control, then this kind of stuff can help prevent them in the future as well.
Well, we have a lot more to share with you. You can tell we're really passionate. We come up with episodes every week to help enrich your running and your life. We loved having Cindy on because she encompassed both of those things. If you would like to follow us, we'd love to continue the conversation with you at AtoZrunning. Please subscribe and share.